as Kratos transitioned from Greek mythology all the way to Norse mythology. Fans of the God of War franchise who might not have been aware of the history behind these mythologies may have noticed some of the very interesting parallels between these pantheons just by playing the games, such as the presence of the Greek gods and the Titans, in comparison to the Aesir gods and the giants, the realms of the dead, Helheim, and the Underworld, and of course Mount Olympus, in comparison to Asgard. Another parallel which not many people might be aware of is the fact that the king of the Olympian gods, Zeus, and the allfather of the Aesir gods, Odin, are both known to share a very similar trait, that of deceiving people or even other gods in the form of disguises and even shape-shifting. In their respective mythologies, both of these gods have numerous stories in which they used disguises to manipulate their targets, an act which we have also seen Zeus performing throughout previous games in the series. In God of War lore, this trait is something Atreus himself would inherit from his grandfather, Zeus, eventually becoming the cunning trickster we all know from Norse mythology, Loki.
Can I turn into an animal?
Can you turn into an animal?
How's it going, guys? It's Python Selkin here, and today we'll be talking about an interesting theory we briefly introduced in our previous analysis for God of War Ragnarok, in which we expressed our suspicions as to why we think there could be more to Tyr's rescue than we're being led to believe, which could lead to a possible betrayal from the Norse God of War himself, Tyr. We highly suggest watching our previous theory video for a better understanding of what we're going to talk about today.
He tortures me, you know. Every day, brother. Odin himself sees to it personally, and believe me, there is no end to his creativity.
As Norse mythology tells us, the Allfather, Odin, was willing to pay any price to gain wisdom and all-seeing knowledge on everything that was happening around him, as well as in other worlds. As we learn from these tales, no sacrifice is too great for wisdom. Odin's strong desire even drove him to sacrifice himself by hanging from the Tree of Life, during which he saw visions and received wisdom he couldn't gain from anywhere else. And if that wasn't enough, he also sacrificed one of his eyes in exchange for mental and intellectual powers that were unmatched by any god, with the eye being seen as poetic symbolism for perception. Considering the fact that Odin was a shapeshifter and was renowned for tricking people with disguises, one of the possibilities we introduced in our previous theory was the notion that this Tyr could in fact be Odin in disguise. Now, assuming the trailer wasn't purposely altered and the scene with Tyr standing up wasn't from a totally different part of the game, upon being found by Kratos and Atreus, Tyr still seemed to have both of his bejeweled eyes intact. This is something we instantly thought was suspicious, for the fact that Mimir, whilst imprisoned, apart from torturing him for the next century, Odin purposely plucked out one of his bejeweled eyes to keep him from traveling to other realms. Not to mention that Mimir was already bound to an indestructible tree, making his chance of escaping little to none. Tyr, on the other hand, wasn't bound to any tree and doesn't appear to be heavily imprisoned as Mimir was, yet Odin still seems to have left him with both of his bejeweled eyes in place.
His eyes, they are jewels, like yours.
Odin plucked out my other eye precisely to keep me from traveling.
Considering how clever the Allfather is said to be, this surely isn't something he would underestimate, unless there was some trickery behind Tyr's rescue.
Odin is extremely clever, you see. Nearly as clever as he thinks he is. And he's a collector of prophecies. If it's about the future, he adds it to his collection. Helps him style himself as all-seeing and all-knowing. But of course, the idea is control. Control of the future, control of his fate. He'd control every realm of every land in every world if he could.
One should also keep in mind that in his sacrifice for wisdom and knowledge, Odin also became a collector of prophecies, as he tries to control fate by knowing the future. So there's a very good chance he already knew Kratos and Atreus were eventually going to rescue Tyr, just as Odin had foreseen in Ragnarok, as well as Kratos and Atreus traveling to Jotunheim in 2018's God of War.
Tell me again how Odin knew we were going to Jotunheim before we did.
And if Odin already knew Kratos and Atreus sought to rescue Tyr, there would be no better opportunity for Odin to ruin their plans with one of his deceptions, if not with a disguise of Tyr, the very same god they were searching for.
Are you coming with us?
As we briefly stated in our previous video, by the time he's rescued, Tyr is supposed to be missing an arm after it was bitten off by Fenrir, a wolf giant considered to be one of the Aesir's greatest enemies. We also stated that according to Mimir, these events should have already happened in the past, so Tyr's arm should already be missing by this point. Since then, some viewers have argued that since Fenrir is the son of Loki, and Loki is obviously still young, Fenrir hasn't been born yet, which is the reason why Tyr hasn't lost his arm. However, things aren't always what they seem when it comes to the God of War franchise. Let's hear what Mimir says during this particular sequence.
You're familiar with the tale of Skoll and Hoti, bringers of day and night?
Oh yeah, the wolf giants.
Aye. They were born of the arch-wolf Hrothwitnir, a great nemesis of the Aesir gods. Odin captured them as pups and kept them in the kennels of Asgard to hold his foe at bay. But when the sun and moon grew mutinous and stood still, Odin put Skoll and Hoti to use. With his ancient magics, he cast the wolves to the heavens, and they began their chase. And long shall they chase, but not endlessly, for it is foretold that someday Skoll and Hoti will catch and devour their prey. And that day shall be Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods.
Skoll and Hoti are the sons of Archwolf Fenrir and the grandsons of Loki, who like Jormungandr already exist in the God of War universe. These two wolf giants are said to have been captured by Odin when they were just pups, and since these wolves determine when Ragnarok begins, they are now being controlled by Odin, as he hopes to prevent the twilight of the gods.
Why is he doing that?
It's always about control. The wolves determine when Ragnarok begins, and now he controls the wolves. A battle fought on his timetable is a battle he better stands to win.
As legend says, Odin had discovered a prophecy in which it was foretold that the children of Loki would cause trouble for the gods. He demanded Fenrir to be brought to him and to be raised among the Aesir. Growing stronger and stronger, the gods feared he would one day destroy them, which led them to chain Fenrir 2 times, with both chains ending up being broken by the wolf giant. After those 2 attempts, Odin had the dwarves create a 3rd chain called Gleipnir, which was made out of 6 impossible ingredients, 2 of which being a cat's footstep and bird's spit.
How are Brock and Sindri supposed to build with whatever they are?
Don't count the dwarves out, lad. They're right pricks, but they're resourceful. They once made an unbreakable chain out of little more than a cat's footstep and bird spit.
That doesn't even make sense.
Further to what Mimir mentions, this unbreakable chain is the one that was purposely created by the dwarfs to hold Fenrir. Being the only way for the animal to let itself be chained, the Norse god of war, Tyr, was the only one who offered to sacrifice his arm while chaining Fenrir with the 3rd and last chain, which pretty much confirms that the Tyr we've seen in the trailer should in fact be missing an arm when he is found by Kratos and Atreus. Unlike Zeus, from what we've seen in Norse mythology, Odin's disguises aren't particularly flawless, since he is mostly depicted with a missing eye, even in his disguised appearance, being unable to hide his iconic characteristic despite assuming someone else's appearance, which could make his disguise pretty distinguishable for those aware of Odin's deceptive abilities.
Appearances can be deceiving, Kratos.
If Odin disguised himself as Tyr to deceive Kratos and Atreus, Tyr having one of his eyes missing would be a dead giveaway that is probably Odin pulling tricks on them, especially if Kratos and Atreus are once again in the company of a particular head.
Head.
Mimir, who has a vast knowledge on Odin's history and secrets. The only way he could pull off a perfect disguise in front of Kratos, Atreus and Mimir would be for Odin to wear Tyr's bejeweled eyes himself, which would explain the reason why, despite his apparent confinement, the Tyr we see in the trailer still has both of his bejeweled eyes, possibly meant to hide the little imperfection Odin has in his disguise, that of missing an eye himself. It's also worth noting that in one of the murals depicting his imprisonment, Tyr is seemingly being watched by Odin and Thor themselves, guarding his location. For Tyr's captivity to be overseen by two of the most powerful Aesir gods pretty much means Kratos and Atreus would have to go through the best Odin and Thor have to offer before they can rescue Tyr. From what we've seen in the trailer though, the fact that Tyr was located behind just another large door and barely appearing chained up when compared to this kind of imprisonment, or even this kind of imprisonment, or perhaps this kind, it seems a little too easy for Kratos to rescue him. Let's not forget, this is a god who was accused of collaborating with the Aesir's arch-enemies, the Giants. If it were up to another king of the gods, Zeus, we definitely know how he punished those who betrayed him.
Who has placed you in this torment? Zeus. My only crime was helping mankind. When I took the fires of Olympus to the mortals, Zeus considered it a betrayal. As punishment, he made me mortal and condemned me to be savagely consumed every day by this cursed bird.
Unless, of course, Tyr's rescue is truly a part of Odin's clever tricks. And if Kratos truly had to go through Odin and Thor's best to rescue Tyr, why show this scene in the very first trailer of the game, especially considering Tyr was said to be dead? It's all pretty suspicious in our book.
Why would you betray me?
Death of Olympus means the death of us all.
Then prepare for your death. Fulfill her fate. Surrender. The All-Father demands it. No. Good. This fight is mine, boy. Go.
This, of course, was just one possibility of the many paths the story could take. As viewers of our previous God of War videos may have noticed, this was an alternate theory to the one we previously talked about with Tyr's possible betrayal. A little message which we'd like to share is that with these videos, we're not trying to say this is something that will surely happen or hit jackpot by trying to be proven right. We're just having fun talking about some interesting ideas from a storytelling perspective, whilst we present them in a cinematic format for your enjoyment, in anticipation for the sequel to one of our favorite franchises of all time.
I am what the gods have made!
With that being said, what are your thoughts on everything you've seen in this video? Could Kratos and Atreus truly have fallen for one of Odin's tricks? Could this version of Tyr actually be the All-Father himself, Odin, in disguise? Or could this be the real Tyr, who's planning to betray Kratos and Atreus? We'd love to hear your own thoughts and theories in the comment section down below. Meanwhile, if you liked this video and enjoy all things God of War, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe to our channel. We'll make sure to return the favor with content you won't find anywhere else. Until next time, Spartans, Python and Selkin, out!